still riding the hype of Boruto Chapter 32. Again, and again. After, in the previous video, we discussed several probabilities, or more precisely, the biggest factors behind the mission, or operation, in the Mamushi invasion arc that should have gone perfectly, things ended in a very ironic yet exciting way. Sarada ends up in critical condition, while Kawaki suffers from overheating after pushing his abilities too far. It's truly a thrilling chapter, where a situation that initially felt very optimistic suddenly turns completely pessimistic, right? And that's not all. We've also discussed several factors that triggered this outcome due to a domino effect set in motion by Koji in recent chapters. Starting from the failure to quickly, or earlier, release Inojin's technique while controlling Kobu's body, it resulted in several crucial pieces of information being missed. Because once again, when Inojin controlled Kobu's body, communication links to all operation members were temporarily cut off at that point. And of course, while those links were down, Shikamaru, as the leader, missed out on other crucial information, especially Sarada's ability, which was supposed to be used at the very end. Unfortunately, Sarada had already used it, and Shikamaru didn't know that. But at least in the next few minutes, I have a pretty interesting question for this chapter. First, if every Mamushi that splits into clones is genuine, and they don't experience any stamina loss or anything like that, does that apply to Damon as well? Second, even though Damon possesses shinjutsu power that's truly insane, will he still win in the end after we've seen the number of Mamushi clones reach 1,000? And crazily enough, that number is still growing? Third, is Kashin Koji's prescience ability still the absolute standard at this point? Especially after seeing so many things happening outside of Koji's predictions. Or perhaps more accurately, has Koji lost the edge of his ability, causing his accuracy in seeing the future to diminish? Yeah, you know what I mean, right? Fourth, has Amado actually pulled another underhanded trick on Kawaki? Or perhaps more accurately, amidst Kawaki's request to make him stronger, has Amado actually failed to fully maximize Kawaki's power? And most importantly, how did Kawaki escape that chaotic situation? Yeah, those are probably some pretty interesting questions so far. And of course, for those questions, I have my own answers. And a disclaimer, all answers are based on my personal analysis and assumptions. If you have answers or even more interesting questions or something like that, let me know in the comments. First and foremost, if every Mamushi clone possesses stamina or even energy that doesn't decrease or deplete after splitting their body, does that apply to Damon as well? I mean, will Damon be able to freely use his limitless Shinjutsu reflection ability? And in my opinion, it seems like Damon has characteristics or powers similar to Mamushi's. But this is more about having the energy or stamina to use the reflection technique without limits and without getting tired. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? I know this might be hard to believe, but let me explain first. In this case, Damon isn't a divine tree human like Mamushi. He's a cyborg, just like Kashin Koji, Code, Ida, Delta, and the others. But for some reason, I think Damon is on a higher level than some of the other cyborgs. This isn't just about Shinjutsu or Shibai DNA alone. Because if we refer to the Shibai cells that grant some cyborgs Shibai abilities, Code shouldn't have been completely and humiliatingly defeated when fighting Damon, especially Code's defeat right after he'd just removed his limiter. And once again, you know what I mean, right? And then there's the question of just how strong Damon is, or how much fatigue he'd actually experience from using his reflective Shinjutsu. At least, in my opinion, that would never happen. I mean, if we look at how Damon's reflection ability has worked so far, there hasn't been a single panel that actually shows him getting tired, even after reflecting attacks against the Mamushi, which I think weren't just dozens, but hundreds. Because based on what Inojin said earlier, thanks to Damon, the number of Mamushi was reduced by half, from hundreds in less than a minute. And maybe if you still remember some of the discussions about Damon over the past few days, especially in the Borushiki versus Kawashiki battle arc, there was one final moment where Kawaki in Ishiki mode almost killed Code. And why do I say almost? Is because when Kawaki unleashed an insanely powerful attack, it actually backfired on him after Code pulled Damon out and reflected the attack. And that's the key point. And here, I think we need to emphasize one thing. A Damon's ability isn't just an ordinary technique that's used, but more of an automatic mechanism that activates as long as the conditions are met. So it's not like ninjutsu that requires a constant flow of chakra until it's depleted. This is more like a rule than a skill. Yeah, that's more or less how we should understand the concept, at least. But what do you guys think about this point? Well, if we compare it to Mamushi, who can split himself without losing stamina, that's where the similarity lies. It doesn't mean they're the same in form or anything like that, but conceptually, there are no direct energy consequences. So my answer to the first question, most likely, yeah. Damon can keep using that reflection ability without any limit on the number of enemies he reflects. That's at least what's been shown so far. But this leads us to the second question, which is far more interesting. Is that enough to win against 1,000 plus mamushi? Honestly, I don't think it's as simple as we imagine, because Damon's reflection has one major weakness that was confirmed in chapter 32. Yeah, even though this weakness has been revealed for a long time, Mamushi's explanation here is enough to convince us of it. In other words, he needs the intent of the opponent, meaning the attack must be directly aimed at him for there to be a chance the Damon will reflect it back at the opponent. However, I'm sure that even with this case, many fans are still curious and wondering. I mean, even if that killing intent is directed at Ida and not him, can Damon still reflect it? And does Damon have to see or know about the opponent's intent beforehand for it to reflect? Then what if that killing intent comes from a blind spot that Damon isn't even aware of? Yeah, you know what I mean, right? Again, a simple example is still in chapter 32. If you look back, every time Damon uses his shinjutsu ability to reflect an attack back at Mamushi, there's always something left behind. Because believe it or not, some of them aren't actually that stupid, especially when their numbers are dwindling. Just look at how each of the mamushi reminds the others not to get provoked so they don't develop a killing intent or anything like that toward the Damon. That alone is enough proof that those who aren't provoked won't die. So at that point, Boruto, who was already aware of this, didn't give mamushi even the slightest chance to think or speak. Now imagine if there were thousands of mamushi all attacking randomly, using area attacks or even methods that don't directly target Damon. That's where a gap would most likely appear. And the greater their numbers, the higher the chance that there will be a brief moment where the reflection system doesn't work optimally. Not because it's weak, but because the situation becomes too chaotic. It's also very reasonable to assume that at least one of the mamushi would realize and understand the concept behind Damon's ability. So, to avoid it, one of them might choose not to act with killing intent or provocation. So in simple terms, even though Damon is overpowered, a 1 versus 1,000 plus scenario isn't just about strength, it's about whether there's a loophole that can be exploited. In other words, considering we can't underestimate Mamushi, there's a strong possibility that Damon wouldn't actually have a chance to win. Moving on to the third point, which is about caching Koji's prescience. This is where I start to waver and question things, because if everything went according to the prediction, the situation wouldn't have become this chaotic. Sarada wouldn't have ended up in critical condition, Kawaki wouldn't have overheated, and the mission wouldn't have fallen apart like it has now. So there are two possibilities. Koji did see this future, but let it happen for the sake of a greater outcome, or his prescience is losing accuracy due to too many variables he can't control. And honestly, I'm leaning more toward the second possibility. Because of factors like the ever-evolving Mamushi, the unpredictable Damon, and even small decisions made on the spot, all of these can create new future paths that weren't visible before. But what do you guys think? And finally, regarding Amado and Kawaki, this is the most suspicious part. If we look at Amado's track record, he almost never does anything without a hidden agenda. So the possibility that he's holding back Kawaki's power makes perfect sense, especially since Amado has gone this far. In other words, it's highly unlikely he'd let all his hard work, patience, and even dedication to bringing his daughter back go to waste just because Kawaki is too obsessed with a power that's actually a double-edged sword for him. So, in conclusion, to avoid the worst-case scenarios, it's possible he intentionally didn't give 100% of the power, whether for control or as a fail-safe in case Kawaki gets out of control, or even if a bad situation happens to him, like what's already happened, right? But what do you guys think? Oh yeah, just for your information. Actually, this video was published a few days ago, but due to a pretty serious issue, I lost my focus and felt genuinely anxious. I was even confused about what to do. Yeah, you probably know what I mean. Over the past few days, I received my second strike, which I think is ridiculous. It was just prediction content without using leaked panels. But for some reason, they gave me a strike. I tried appealing, but they rejected it. If I may ask for your help, please help by mentioning the YouTube team in the post I made on X, or subscribing to my other channel as a backup. Thank you for watching. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. Dadabayo.